In this video, we're going to take a look at what's new in Fusion 360 PCB for the March 2022 update. Hey everyone, this is Matt with Learn Everything About Design, and in this video I want to cover what's new in Fusion 360 PCB for the March 2022 update. We're not going to go over everything that has changed, but I'm going to cover the two main topics that I think are the most important to us. And that's going to be the addition or the change of place component and the library manager. Now, these two things will fundamentally change the way that you interact with the different pieces of your design. And what I mean by that is when you're placing components or when you're working in a library, the interface is completely different. The back-end functionality is still going to be the same, but we have a couple new tips and tricks that we can deal with. So the first thing I want to note is that place component is going to be above the design manager by default. We can simply expand it and get access to the place components, or we can select place component. And the only thing that does is it expands the place components and it minimizes your design manager. So that is true whether you're inside of the schematic or if you're inside of the board layout. It's going to be exactly the same in the same location. You're going to get access to similar functionality. When I say similar functionality, generally what we do is we place all of these different pieces, these elements, the components, in our schematic, and then they get populated inside of our board where we move them around and place them where we need them. So again, the access to that is in the same place. The information that you can see is in the same place. But what does this really do for us? How is this different? Well, the main way that it's different is that we have a completely different interface. It is not going to be a modal dialog. It means it doesn't pop up over our window. We have to search through, find what we want, decide on the component we want, and then the dialog sort of hides itself so we can place our components. It's always going to live here on the left-hand side, which makes it much easier for us to add a bunch of components really quickly. So first, we can look in all libraries. We can filter by specific things like name, description, library, or we can just type something. So if I start to type 555, say I wanted to add a timer, you can see that it brings up a bunch of different components. We've got the library IC clock, we've got an Adafruit library, we have another one here. If we expand this out, you can see that we've got terminals, tutorial, and so on. But not all of these are timers. You can see here that the 555, these two are definitely timers. And as we go through, some of these will just have 555 in the part number. So when we're filtering through, you can see that it has a lot of power to pull out very specific bits of information quickly and leave us with just the items that are of use to us. So once we're here, what we can do is then we can look down through the variants. If there are multiple packages for the same part or the same component. Now, in some cases, what you'll find is there'll be additional links or information to the data sheets, to a website. If it's a library that's like Adafruit or SparkFun, or it's coming from a vendor, a lot of times you're going to get extra hyperlinks and information that'll go directly to those components. Here you see if we go to the IC clock library, you can see here we've got the Texas Instruments data sheet, we've got information about the LM555 and the LMC555, and all that information is directly here under the details. We can also change the way that the details look if we want a large preview or if we want all three thumbnails displayed next to each other. We have attributes where we can look down through the attributes. We can find exactly what the frequency of this timer is. We can see up here that the current supply is 10 milliamps, and we can go down, find its operating temp and all that kind of stuff. So a very nice layout, a very quick way for us to go through and figure out what components we want. If I'm happy with this component, all I need to do is drag it and drop it into my design. As soon as I drag it and drop it and let go of the left mouse button, you can see I can place it anywhere I want. Right click to rotate it just like we could before, and then simply hit OK when we're done. That's going to automatically get pushed over to our board. And again, you can see here that we've got the 555 timer that's been added. Our library is still displayed over here on the left side. If we minimize our design manager, you can see everything's gray because we don't typically add components when we're doing our board layout. That's all done at the schematic level. But you can see that it still lives in the same place and still gives us information about whatever we have selected. So if I was looking through here, I could still browse through the library. I could find the specific footprint, and you can see that information directly here. So again, it's helpful, especially if you need to switch to a different variant, a different version of that component. Maybe you're looking at a surface mount versus a through hole or something like that. So that information is great. It's much easier for us to get access to. And now the next piece of this puzzle is the library manager. And again, there's multiple ways that we can get to it. When you have place components, in this case it's expanded, we can open the library manager directly from here, or we can still go to the library tab and open it here. Now you're going to notice that the library manager has received a major overhaul. It looks very different. If you're coming from Eagle into Fusion 360, this is probably a much better interface for you. If you've only used Fusion 360 PCB, there are just a few things that we need to understand for what we're looking at. So first, we can filter by a couple different things, whether or not things are in use or not in use. And essentially what that's talking about is whether or not the library is used. So in the past, if we wanted to go to a library, what we would need to do is find it in the list, and then we would need to enable it before we could really look through it and find our components. Now we can simply select a library, and we can go through and we can see what kind of information is inside of it. When you select on a library that's enabled or in use, you can see that we've got the components and the packages previews here. So again, when we select some of these libraries, we're not seeing anything unless we download and enable the library. But it does give us a bit more information about what is in here. You can see that we can go to PCBlayout.com for, in this case, it's talking about for PCB layout manufacturing, ordering, and so on. So again, just a little bit more information than we had before. And again, if we go to the ones that are enabled or in use, we can see exactly what is in that library. So it helps us a lot when we're trying to pick out those components and packages. Also note that at the very top, it tells us that this is Fusion Libraries and Local Library. And you can tell that Fusion Libraries is grayed out and Local Library isn't. When we look through our sources, anything that we've created on Fusion Teams, any libraries that we have here, those will be displayed when we're using this filter. If we look at our local disk, now in the past, what had happened is these were any libraries that were downloaded and included in Fusion 360. So here we can select a library and we can see all of the packages. If you're coming from library.io, if you're hosting a managed library and you're working through multiple users, this is a big change because this will help you understand which libraries are enabled, which ones are in use, and where those pieces are coming from. So for me, I've only created 2 libraries in Fusion Team. I can see exactly what's in them. And that helps me understand if I have any overlap between the two. We can see the version of the library and again, if it's in use or not. We have a couple extra options here. We can toggle on update when available. We can only select ones that are in the current design. And then we can also see if we can import libraries to here. We can remove from view if we want to hide something. And you can see here that we can also disable or enable the libraries with the toggle here. Now, if the library is in use, the only one we're going to be able to do is disable it. If it's not in use, then we'll be able to enable it. So again, very handy for us to be able to find any of these libraries that are currently in use in our designs. You'll notice that this is not necessarily restricted to your Fusion team or your local disk, but you can go into all of your managed folders for all of your libraries. If you want to look at a very specific publisher, for example, you can go through and you can find just the libraries that I'm using from SparkFun. You can see I haven't used any. Maybe I want to look at libraries that I've brought in from Eagle PCB. And again, I don't have any, but in this case, you can see that you can go through and just filter out your libraries a whole lot easier than you could in the past. So this is the basic overview of the 2 major changes, the ability to add parts in a different manner with place components, and the ability for us to go into our library manager and have a bit more control over finding out what's in there, what's being used, if the libraries are enabled, and where they're managed, if they're on our local disk, if they're in Fusion Team, or if they're library.io. There are a couple of new updates, some additional functionality that has come in that I'm not going to cover because I'm not a user that's coming from Eagle to Fusion 360 PCB. But if you are, I suggest that you look into the what's new for the insert schematic and insert design block. These two will allow you to reuse some of the stuff that you've created in Eagle, and it's a good way for us to transition some of that data directly into Fusion 360. So again, library.io and some of the new place options in Fusion 360 can really help users that are transitioning. That was just the basic overview of the changes from March 2022 to Fusion 360 PCB. I've been waiting a while for the library to be updated, so I'm really happy to see that it did make it into this new update, and hopefully it'll be a lot easier for users to navigate and use. If you have any questions, please let me know. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.